Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session on learner-centered responsible management education, regional examples of good practice. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people as the traditional owners of the land from where I join this global virtual forum today. I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. I'm Associate Professor Harsh Suri, and I lead SDG integration into curricula at Deakin University. I'm on the Prime ANZ Chapter Steering Committee, and I led the curriculum team on the team tasked with producing the blueprint for SDG integration into curriculum, research, and partnerships. So today's session is very close to my heart because we know that students are the most important stakeholder in our discourse on responsible management education. So we aim to stimulate critical conversations to address the following broad question. How can we effectively engage students in responsible management education in ways that matter to them? We notice that despite the extensive rhetoric around responsible management education, meaningful integration of ESR across mainstream management curricula still remains patchy in most business schools. Many faculty and students perceive responsible management education as being peripheral to business education rather than it being the core. Many students also feel that even if they learn about ERS behaviors, they'll not have an opportunity or the agency to change business practices that tend to be more focused on promoting profits. So each panelist today will respond to this broad question, and we encourage all of you to share on the Padlet, the link to which is posted in the chat, your examples of strategies that have been effective in your particular context, because we understand there's no one size fits all for all contexts. In particular, we would like the panelists and you to unpack the following questions for your specific regional context. Who are our students? What matters to them? What are their aspirations and expectations from our business schools? How can we prepare them for catalyzing a positive impact? Is the industry ready for responsible management graduates? So I'll hand over to the esteemed panelists in today's session. We'll begin with Dr. Craig Parker, who's a senior lecturer of information systems at Deakin University, Australia. He researches on engaging small businesses in environmental and social responsibility, and his curriculum innovations for fostering RME and graduate employability have been recognized as exemplary within our own institution at national levels and at international levels as well. Craig, over to you now.
Well, thank you, Hirsch. So in Australia, most students join business schools to enhance progress or change their careers. So meaningful responsible management education in an Australian context therefore requires us as educators to align the needs of industry, the needs of students, and also the ESR agenda. Typically, business schools in Australia have large cohorts of international students. These students often seek employment in Australia after graduation, often have limited industry experience, especially the Australian industry experience that Australian employers are looking for, and typically leave it too late in their program to identify and seek work integrated learning experiences, which in Australia often are electives. I'll share an example of how we adopted a scalable, programmatic approach to enhance international student employability and to develop their ESR capability. Our initiative was initially created for students in Deakin's Master of Information Systems, or MIS. So we identified a win-win opportunity for industry and for students with respect to ESR. So many Australian businesses lack resources and know-how to improve their practices with ESR sensibilities, and or are looking for new talent with ESR know-how. So students, by contrast, want and need industry experience, which we think includes ESR capabilities. So we therefore embedded ESR-based experiential learning in compulsory courses in the MIS program. where students engage with real business problems and often with real businesses. So these compulsory courses then complement any elective work integrated learning. So in the first year of the program, MIS students are introduced to ESR in a compulsory course on the ethics of digital transformation. So students learn, for example, ESR principles that are embedded in the Australian IT industry's code of conduct, learn how digital transformation can help businesses to address ESR challenges, and also learn the ethical problems caused when businesses implement digital transformation. In the second year of the program, MI students have various opportunities to enhance their employability and ESR capabilities directly with businesses. So firstly, students complete a compulsory course on digital transformation of supply chains. Students are encouraged to find a real business for their assignment and interview a manager about their supply chain practices. They then write a report that can include identifying ESR issues with the supply chains, evaluating the ESR issues associated with implementing a digital transformation solution. This can include environmental impact improvements and or problems with the solution, staff resistance issues, and so forth. So this in turn builds students' confidence and skills in approaching and undertaking a professional task with a real business owner. Secondly, students complete a compulsory capstone course where students develop a solution for a real industry client that must address ESR issues. Third, students can then complete one or more work integrated learning electives. So prior to our initiatives, we found that MIS students typically didn't do these electives. So our initiative has led MIS students to feel more confident in sourcing a client, which is a prerequisite for some work integrated learning electives. And plus students therefore gain the skills they need also for seeking jobs in Australia after graduation. And an alternative elective option focuses entirely on ESR. So for example, due to restrictions of international travel, we could not engage students with SDG-focused international mobility experiences. So we created opportunities for our students to complete SDG-focused global virtual projects sourced from 3 NGOs in India. And we've found that other course leaders within our university and other Australian universities have drawn upon elements of our programmatic initiative. So thank you, and I'll pass back to our next speaker or to Hirsch.
Thank you so much, Craig. And it's really good the way Craig has strengthened the nexus between employability agenda, which is very important for students, business school students in Australia, and Sustainable Development Goals education. Our next panelist is Dr. Norman de Paula Arruda Filho. He's the president of the Instituto Superior de Administration and Economics, ISAIA, affiliated with the Getulio Vargas Foundation, Brazil. Norman is a member of the Brazilian Committee of the UNGC, and he's currently on the Prime Global Council. In 2020, he was awarded the Seaman Champions Award as Responsible Management Educator of the Year. Thank you, Norman. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. I congratulate Professor Harsh Suri for coordinating this panel and all the directors or the coordinators of the Global Forum and panelists. I began my speech highlighting the results of the maintenance of ISAI's commitments to transparency and the UN initiatives, in which we are signatories such as the Global Compact that was challenged, and especially because the pandemic caused by the coronavirus, and for being the 25th year that is the history. A few years, our focus will remain on people in a world without borders to facilitate the virtual integration. And with a transformative education, the ISAI student is the leader of the development and will continue to guide it based on ethical principles in favor of sustainable development and more inclusive world. 2020 was one year that drove us towards digital transformation, made us look for solutions that we create value, experiences, and search of sustainable results. During the institutions of strategic planning in December 2020, rereading of the mission as launched, adapted the new ISAI with the guide inspiring people and organizations to build sustainable legacies. Why? Because it is an experience that we have developed during 3 years ago, and it was very impressive. The dedication of the students when we define what was the main strategic to define legacy. And it was very, very interesting because they established a new cooperation with the company, with the market, with the several institutions, invited them to come to the ISAI to discuss the big challenges, the big projects, and how the students would work them to redefine some strategies. And the most interesting was the dedication that invited the students to make a laboratory to discuss with professors, with the monitor from the companies, to define what is the solution for the big problems that they have, and in how to deal with this solution, how to build, to redefine, Craig, how to define the main challenge that they have. That is the company waiting for the students, and we have they were studying the masters and redefining what were the main objective. And the most interesting was the result of this integration, because they were to visit the company to have an idea about what was the big challenge that they have to face, what was the big problem that they have to review the process, and to bring new solutions. And the most interesting was that they invited the professors, the coordinators, the researchers, in order to redefine the research of project. And it was very interesting because they not only developed a new research, but they discovered the solution for this problem. So it was a surprise for us, because the company and the directors, the engineers, come to the ISAI to discuss with all the students, to share what was the big problem, what was the strategy, what was the main solution that the students help the engineers of the companies to redefine the solutions. So I think that it was just an example about this one. And we defined that it was when we redefine our goal to inspiring people and organizations to build sustainable legacies, it was interesting to redefine, to understand it. What can I, as a student, a regular student, to redefine legacies, to build legacies? Yeah. What is my personal, as a student, to redefine this process? And it was a very surprise for us that they started to work to build these legacies, working in order to redefine the challenge, the project.
Thank you so much,
And
Norman. Thank you so
I'm
much,
sorry?
Norman. Thank you so much, Norman. We'll keep moving to the next speaker and we'll invite you to share
Okay.
more experiences. But what's really remarkable about your presentation is the way you engaged all stakeholders into this discussion about strategy. And that is fantastic. And the way you strengthen the nexus between teaching and research, particularly from a Brazilian context. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Dr. Rumina
Okay,
Dhalla. Our next speaker is Dr. Rumina Dhalla. She's the Vice Chancellor of the Prime North America chapter. And Rumina is an Associate Professor and Director at the Institute for Sustainable Commerce, Gordon School of Flank School of Business and Economics, University of Guelph, Canada. Over to you, Rumina.
Oh, thank you so much, Harsh. I'm so happy to be here, and to my colleagues on this panel for inviting me the opportunity to explore the critical question on how to effectively engage students in responsible management education in ways that matter is really appreciated. I should perhaps just say I'm the vice chair of the North American chapter. So at the Gordon S. Lang School of Business and Economics, we have been taking a multi-pronged strategic approach to integrate responsible management education in our business school. So today I'll outline a couple of examples on how we make this work. I'll try to get one from both our graduate and undergraduate program. So for our graduate program, we created an MBA in Sustainable Commerce, and our MBA in Sustainable Commerce explores how sustainability can and should be integrated into modern business operations and practices. So this program, which caters to working professionals across industries, explores the strategic and operational side of corporate sustainability, why it's important, and what leaders can and should do to inspire organizational and social change. So we address issues of responsibilities as organizations and as leaders from a global organizational and individual perspective. We explore critical issues facing our global society, such as climate issues, poverty, hunger, racism, social justice, and environmental governance. We look at organizations, their strategies, and their responses to these critical issues, and we focus on strategies for transformative change. So for example, in the program's core course, Sustainable Value Creation, students work in groups to research an organization or industry that they believe could become more sustainable along considerations of economic, social, and environmental value creation. So these cases are carefully selected, they're researched, they're analyzed, and proposed reinventions are then presented in class. We also tackle our individual values and responsibilities and strive to find ways to connect at a systems level for sustainable change. This theme continues on until the end of the program. For example, a prior MBA capstone course focused on the case of a natural products company, which aimed to be the global leader in a natural products sector. So our Lang MBA students were tasked with conducting a global market assessment and exploring the strategic opportunities for this company to sustainably expand in specific market categories such as nutraceuticals, bio-based agri-products, animal feed additives, natural vet care products, and bioplastics. We've achieved both internal and external validation and recognition for the program. We now get over 70% of our MBA applications to this stream. And externally, this MBA in 2020 was ranked #1 in Canada and #6 globally by the Corporate Knights Better World MBA rankings. A remarkable achievement, I think, for a new MBA stream introduced a few short years ago. In our undergraduate program, we take an active learning approach. For example, we have the Great Ethical Dilemma case competition. Solving an ethical dilemma within a matter of hours is no easy task. And as part of the first year introduction to business course, our Lang students develop and present their solutions to a real world ethical problem to executives from leading national companies. So working in groups, students are presented with different hypothetical ethical dilemmas specific to a publicly traded company that they have studied the entire semester. The teams assume the roles of senior employees and are given 36 hours to resolve this dilemma and present recommendations to executives of the relevant industries in a live case competitions. So among other factors, students need to decide how to proceed if the actions recommended by others are in contradiction with their own personal values. So successfully resolving these ethical dilemmas requires students to fully understand the context in which the decision has been made and requires critical thinking skills to apply the tools and decision-making criteria taught in our class. What is unique is that this learning happens in the first year introductory course, and this sets the tone for the learning experience in the entire program. Undergrad students also participate in a sustainability conference fully organized by the Lang Student Association with some guidance and support from faculty members and the Institute for Sustainable Commerce. They design the conference and the program, they invite the applications, they find speakers and funding and judges, and they've done that for 2 years with extraordinary success. It really is active learning. One outcome from a previous in-person conference, which is now virtual, so they created a sustainable conference guide aiming to reduce footprints of these kinds of events, which can now be used in other events. What we have found is that it's important to engage students on multiple levels, not just through curriculum, but also through events and activities. The outcomes are key to impact. Gaining external recognition and validation reinforces the value of the activity. I will stop here. Hopefully we can have additional conversations around strategies. Thank you so much, Harsh. Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much, Romina. Another example of very authentically engaging different stakeholders in the discussion on responsible management education. And I particularly like the way you contextualize and you have a nuanced approach to how you integrate responsible management education in executive education versus how you do it for undergraduate students, because they are very different cohorts. And that's precisely what we are trying to emphasize in today's session. No one size fits all. And even within the same business school, as Romina's shared with us, different approaches would work for different cohorts. Thank you, Romina. Our next speaker is Dr. Jill Vogee. She leads prime initiatives at the Gordon Institute of Business Science, University of Pretoria, South Africa. And she's been instrumental in establishing a new chapter, a new prime chapter. Over to you, Jill.
Thank you, Harsh. And also, it's great to join this session with such great colleagues, and it's so interesting to learn from each other. So in South Africa, just a little bit of context before I introduce and talk about the students, because South Africa is known to be one of the most unequal societies in the world, and Gibbs is situated at the heart of the corporate headquarters, the corporate business center of South Africa, which is in Johannesburg and particularly in Sandton. And just down the road, only a couple of kilometers away, are some of the poorest communities in South Africa. And for my colleagues who have actually visited South Africa, they will remember that there's literally a highway between the wealth of the corporate South Africa and the poor communities, where many of the workers and many of the employees actually live. And so the inequality is very stark in the Johannesburg area. And this is characteristic across South Africa. So really it's not possible to understand a business in South Africa that doesn't take the society into account. And there's many corporate social responsibility initiatives. But the thing that's very different here, and I think this goes to the question that has been posed for this panel, is that many companies still do not integrate the SDGs into their core business strategy. So much good work is done in CSR, but it's just not enough. And that's also where GIBS has a big role to play, is as our prime responsibility, but something that is part of our DNA, something that really was part of GIBS Business School when it was founded 20 years ago and remains so important to us, is integrating SDGs into what we do as a business school. So that's a bit of positioning in terms of context. So it's not just the fact that, you know, Africa is known for issues like poverty. It's this very stark inequality that we have in South Africa. Other issues that we deal with are huge issues to do with unemployment, particularly youth unemployment, and the role of business in upskilling. It's not just the education system that needs to be fixed, it's also companies that consider the skills and expertise and how they can develop pipelines of and help with the education problems and situations of skills development. We have gender violence and many disturbing issues when it comes to gender, and climate change. We're one of a very water scarce and a country that has many fluctuations in its climate, and it's a very dry. And many of you may know that Cape Town has the almost became day zero, no water. So that's the context. What about our students? Our students are all postgrads. Our school is founded on MBA students who are senior managers or managers that are moving into senior positions. We also have some postgraduate courses for young graduates who don't have extensive business experience. And at the other end, our MPhil programs are aimed at senior executives, many of whom are already directors or hold senior positions and strategic positions. So very different from what you described, Craig, and also Romina, you have a variety of different students. So our students are really the current and the future leaders of South Africa that need to deal with these very significant problems. So to give you an example, the first part of our MBA, a core course, which used to be just a business problem that allowed the students to integrate the various functional skills that they were developing. A few years ago, my colleague Hayley Pearson decided to give a choice to the students, either an economic problem or a social problem. And within the following year, seeing how many students actually took up the social impact option, which was over 70%, the following year, the decision was taken that all students needed to work on an SDG. So this is a core course. It's a course that's examined. It's a course that is course marks towards the MBA. It's a 9-month course, and it's a syndicate assignment. And each syndicate group has to choose an SDG. And they work on these for 9 months. We allocate them a supervisor. They do the research on a particular problem. Problems range from water issues to youth unemployment, to education issues, to energy issues, renewable energy. So across the spectrum of SDGs. And they work on these problems. And the key here is that they find a feasible and viable business solution so that they apply their business knowledge to finding something that is a workable solution, whether it be an app, up, whether it be a new form of energy. So I think I've probably used my time up, but I'd love to talk more about this project. I'm very proud of it, very proud of the students that work on it. So thank you very much for the opportunity, Harsh.
Thank you so much, Jill, for sharing the context in which your business school operates and the context of your students. And it's another really good example of how you've tailored the education program based on the specific needs of your community, of your region, and of your students. Our next speaker is Professor Ishwar Haritas. He's the head and coordinator of TAPMI Center for Inclusive Growth and Competitiveness in India. Over to you, Ishwar.
Thanks, Harsh. Am I clearly audible, all of you? Wonderful. Thank you, Harsh, and congratulations for putting this very interesting panel together and a very important one, especially in the context of PRME. So speaking about India in general and South Asia, to start with, if I may set the context a little bit in terms of the SDGs, it's estimated that at least about 40 to 50% of all the targets, the SDG related targets, are actually within South Asia, and the majority of that is in India. So in terms of context, I would think our context here in India and South Asia is probably most similar to what Jill has in South Africa and in Africa in general, and probably also in Latin America that Norman was talking about before. Overall, I think my observation has been that there are broadly two approaches to responsible, what we call as RME in India, at least amongst the top schools. So they say the top 30 to 50 schools. One essentially sees the learner as having a sort of indirect relationship with development outcomes, and therefore then the RME tends to focus on connecting them to what are considered primary actors such as NGOs. And the exposure is essentially to NGOs working on lots of different things, but usually around development outcomes which are sort of philanthropic or social work related, or essentially things to like working with individuals with special needs, etc. A second approach is, of course, is what is more sustainability driven, and in that sense looks at sustainability as a transformation agenda and an agenda to really change the way we do business. And this is the approach we take at the TAPI Management Institute, where we see learners as managers and leaders, and therefore being responsible as agents of change, as having a role in actually changing the way we do business. And therefore, whether they work with business or government or NGOs or small, medium, micro enterprises, whichever those are, then we're looking at the role of RME as giving them the tools to be able to create, for instance, operational, increase operational efficiencies within the supply chain, etc., or access to markets, to mainstream markets for small producers, reconfiguring value chains, so as to increase equity, access to finance and financial products and business development services, or technical assistance as it is known in UN parlance, or access to skills and or have to do with evaluation, monitoring, and creation of dashboards, etc. In terms of so that's RME from a transformative agenda point of view, which is the view we take at my school. In terms of students, again, talking about the top 30 to 50 schools, most students in India, and I think this would also be true of South Asia in general, they come from mostly middle class or upper middle class backgrounds, and to a certain extent they're actually as divorced from these contexts where most of the sustainability related work needs to happen, as say students in Australia or in Europe or in the US or North America, etc. So that's one. So their focus tends to be to get high-paying jobs with large businesses. Now there's also a little bit of a focus on they want jobs and high-paying possible, but with startups. So that's a trend that we see. There's another smaller sort of newer trend as well, where students want to start up themselves. So they want to experience being entrepreneurs. Some have had exposure to social work, to philanthropy. So in general, they sort of have a higher than average sensibility around these issues. And then we have a small number of students who come from backgrounds where they might themselves have seen hardship. So economically disadvantaged backgrounds, or disadvantaged, because of other reasons. In general, therefore, we see that students are responsive depending on how much emphasis is placed by the potential employer. So if you look at, say, healthcare or energy or agro-processing, infra and housing, mobility, etc., these are sectors where sustainability is core, where this is about business now and business in the future. Some sectors like IT and consulting, hospitality, etc., they tend to focus more on what Jill was also talking about, more from a CSR point of view. So in general, therefore, students are more and more responsive. And to finish off, so what we're doing at TAPME is that, so we have 3 types of courses. One, and by the way, this RME for us is for all our programs, all the 4 programs. So that's over 500 students, the entire batch. So one is in the classroom. So this is about concepts and tools, etc. We have a second course which is on the field, which is almost 6 months long, and they actually work on problems either with a small company, a large company, an NGO, a government, or whatever. And in the second year, what we are trying to do more and more now is to, at least for some of these students, to go deeper into in innovation, social innovation, and to eventually also think about starting up on their own, to actually create social enterprises. So that's basically all of what we're trying to do. So I'll stop there and look forward to coming back in a later part of the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ishwar. Another good example where we kind of are reminded that let's not assume that our student cohort is a homogeneous group. We do have variations within our own cohorts as well. And some excellent examples that I've been hearing as being part of the Prime community are where students are actually empowering other students who may not be as privileged as themselves. So a very good example from our own business school is where we have executive MBA students coaching students in another course which has large cohorts of international students who aspire to get jobs in the Australian economy or the Australian industry, but they don't have the skills for that. So that mentoring program is really working well. So we're trying to teach that, charity begins at home. So don't ignore your peers in your attempts to try to do social good. I think the key theme that's coming out from all the speakers today is that transforming business practices necessitates that we don't stand on the high moral ground and teach students responsible management education as an abstract concept. Rather, we must engage them authentically in ways that matter to them. So we need to understand who are our students, what's the community within which they are working, what are their priorities, what are their aspirations, and then link our program along with those goals, student aspirations, student expectations, and also ensure that we can extend their aspirations as well. So we can kind of build that critical reflexivity amongst students so that they can change, they can transform business practices. Given the diversity of business schools, as kind of became so obvious from today's panels, students and their aspirations, it's important that we do keep reminding ourselves there's no one size that fits all. We need multiple contextualized approaches to responsible management education that cater to the learning needs and aspirations of our students and the communities that they are trying to serve. Collectively, I think all of us need to together explore what works for whom, under what circumstances, and we need to be careful that we don't try to we don't try to recognize or kind of tag any one specific practice as the best practice, because that would not be catering to the needs of our diverse cohorts. So please continue posting examples of good practice to the Padlet link that has been provided to you. And please post some examples of scalable and sustainable practices that have worked particularly well within your region. And in this final 5 minutes, I would like to invite all the panelists perhaps to speak for 30 seconds. What do they think should be the way forward for responsible management education, keeping in mind what's the key issue within their regional context. So I might just go around in the order of speakers that we started with. Craig, perhaps you could say something about the Australian context. Sorry, Craig, you are muted.
Yeah, so I think for particularly our region, yeah, I think it's about students educating businesses and businesses educating students. So we do have a situation where not all businesses in Australia are ESR aware or capable and so forth. And yeah, so getting that nexus working more effectively, I think will be a key strategy going forward.
Thanks, Craig. I'll next move to Norman, and please keep tagging the next speaker so that we can wrap it up in time. Norman, what do you think is the critical issue in Brazil? 30 seconds pitch, please. Norman, you're muted. Norman, could you please unmute yourself? I think we've lost. Norman, you're muted, so we can't hear you. I think we lost Norman there. We'll keep moving on and then come back to Norman. Rumina?
Oh, thank you so much. Amazing conversation. So I think one of the things we know in Canada is we've got quite a privileged, lifestyle. We have access to education and healthcare, and we do live in that privilege. And so one of the things that we try to do is connect to the global systems and individual responsibility to global responsibility, and explore this privilege and our place on the planet. So I think we continue to do that, is connect up and say all these issues affect us, and what is our responsibility to solve these challenges.
Thank you, Rumina. Jill?
Thank you. I think the key here in South Africa is making global goals local business. And I know that that's a theme also of the UN Global Compact. And what that really means is practical, not just classroom, but practical situations, practical assignments. And that would be my focus, and multiple opportunities on multiple courses.
Thank you, Jill. Ishwar?
Right. I would say that given the scale of the issues in India and the urgency, and in South Asia as well, I would say, so we have to place sustainability at the core of management education in general. So we have to push, especially within the PRME community, such that, for instance, all supply chains have to be sustainable. So for all finance courses have to be about sustainable investing and sustainable finance. And so forth. So we shouldn't anymore say in 10 years have any such thing as an unsustainable business. I know it's ambitious and it's a tall order, but if we don't push, it's never going to happen. So the time is now, and we really need to push this agenda.
Sorry, Norman, could you please unmute yourself? And perhaps you could share 30 minutes. I think Norman, you're muted, so we can't hear you. Okay, perhaps I think we can't unmute Norman. So at this, we might just wrap up the session. But it's been an absolute pleasure sharing this discussion with you all. Please keep posting your examples in the chat session and in the Padlet. Thank you.